host, not for possession, Narcissa Deville, and welcome to hell. For as long as I can remember, I have always liked feminine things. I liked heels, Barbies, dresses, makeup, any excuse to have my older cousin, who was basically like my sister, kind of make me up and put me in girly things was like something I was here for. And for the longest time, I was always pegged as odd and different because of it. And then by elementary school, I was pegged as gay. I had no idea what the word even meant, but I knew by the way they were saying it, it probably wasn't something I wanted to be. And so I denied it profusely. By the time I was 13, I really started to question my sexuality. And I kind of figured, well, if everyone's been telling me I am gay, I should probably figure out what that means. At the time, I identified as a boy. And I bring this up because I think in a lot of times when we talk about trans identities, we feel like there's this idea that you always knew. But for me, it wasn't something that occurred to me. Even though I liked girly things, I was always the sort of person that my parents never really made a big deal out of it. Neither of my parents cared that I liked dresses or makeup. They didn't say anything, and so it wasn't something that I thought had anything to do with my gender identity. From the outset, my attraction to girls, or at least the girls that I had surrounded myself with, wasn't really there. And so I started to realize that I was probably gay. And I was terrified. I was raised in a Republican and Catholic household where being gay wasn't even something we talked about. I had no idea what to think, but I did know what the church thought about it. And that terrified me. I spent the next few years trying to deny myself, even going so far in my freshman year of high school as to date a girl, and I adored her, so I figured I can't really be gay, right? No matter what anyone else, including myself, had to say about it. Unfortunately for me, the relationship didn't last, and I was forced to confront the thoughts in my mind that I might be gay, or at the very least bi, which to me seemed like a happy medium in which I didn't have to fully come out. Around this time, I also left my Catholic roots with full support of my mother and became a Wiccan. For me, Wicca offered me a lack of judgment for who I was, and even though I wasn't fully ready to come out, I knew that when I did, I wasn't going to be judged by my religion for it. By my sophomore year of high school, I had my first crush on a boy, and I realized that I was unapologetically gay, and I had to start the long process of figuring out how to tell the people around me. I started with my mother, and however close we had been, I was terrified. I was 16 years old, and we hadn't really ever had a talk about it before, and so I didn't know how she would react. She was quiet, but extremely supportive. By 18, I had managed to come out to my entire school, and I'd even made a bid for prom queen. And there were a lot of people who wanted to vote for me. Unfortunately, the principal was not on board. I was popular for the sheer fact that I was the stereotypical sassy gay best friend. I was loud and shady and catty, and it got me the attention that I so desperately craved at the time. And I believed that everyone should just live so honestly. If you were gay, just be gay. If you were straight, just be straight. Bisexuality, the haven for which I had identified once upon a time, was no longer a part of my worldview. I hate to admit this, but I actually struggled with biphobia during my late teenage years into my early 20s. I'm not proud of it, but I think it's something that's important to talk about. The possibility that someone could be attracted to both men and women wasn't something that fit into my narrow worldview. And it wasn't until I started transitioning that I started to realize that sexuality and gender are a lot more complicated than I originally thought. I struggled with coming to terms with my bisexuality for a long time because I was so heavily invested in this idea that while women were great, vagina was not. I was heavily invested in the stereotype of gay men being repulsed by women's bodies, and I think this stereotype might have been why it took me so long to realize my own gender identity. I also struggled to accept my bisexuality because I was under the impression that being someone who leaned towards men and hadn't actually intentionally dated a woman since my freshman year of high school, that I couldn't really call myself bi. I wasn't even sure if I could date a woman or what that would look like. It took listening to bi people and a lot of introspection for me to be able to realize that bisexuality is complicated. You don't necessarily have to have dated one gender or another to be able to call yourself bi. It's more about the possibility and the interest. You can lean towards one or the other gender, and even if you end up in a relationship with someone of the same sex or a different sex, it doesn't actually erase your bisexuality. I had long ago given up the notion that bisexuality was just a myth for people who didn't want to come out as gay or straight, and I decided that it was kind of the next stage of evolution. It made the most sense. It wasn't until my late 20s when I started having crushes on other women, which completely threw me for a loop, by the way, that I started to realize that my sexuality was a lot more complicated than even I had realized. It's now been 14 years since my original questions of my sexuality and 5 years since I came out and started transitioning. And I think I'm a more fully realized version of myself. I still have some questions about the intricacies of dating a woman while trans, but I figure I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I wouldn't exactly call this video a coming out video, more of a how I got here video. I'm hoping that by sharing my story that other people will be able to realize some things about themselves, or if nothing else, that maybe this video will educate you on what it means to be bi and trans. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give me a like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to support me as a creator, you can consider donating to my Ko-Fi/Patreon page. All of that information will be in the description box below. Bye!